You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
And away we go, day 2 here from Stadium Swim in Sin City ahead of Friday's NHL Draft Round 1. Nick Alberga, Matt Larkin, and of course Steven Ellis on location. Boys, how are we doing today?
Oh, Nick, I feel so good right now. And we're at Circa, and there are dance beats blaring 24/7, and I should be annoyed, but I'm not, and my feet are tapping. I don't know if you can see them right now, but I'm feeling these vibes right now.
It's a good time. It's a good time.
Oh, man, this setup has been amazing. Shout out to our friends over at Circa and Stadium Swim for the hospitality all week long. We'll be with you again coming up tomorrow ahead of round 1 of the NHL Draft. Steven, this is pretty much your Christmas, right?
It is. This World Juniors, everything. Like, this is, everyone's here. It's a good time.
What's your expectation the next couple of days? Just so it doesn't have to just be the Leafs. Your expectation when it comes to this draft?
Well, I'm expecting more trades than we saw last year on day 1, which was 0, and we've already had the one draft pick trade here between San Jose and Buffalo. So, obviously Celebrini's going to go number 1. After that, that's a question. Yeah,
and we're going to dive into that certainly on today's show. Bringing Steven on obviously has the expertise behind the scenes when it comes to all the prospects. We're going to zone in on a couple names that maybe Leafs fans should become familiar with. Obviously, over the next couple of days, there's going to be some guys drafted. The Leafs, the picks aren't there like they used to be, but certainly I think when your team contending, decisions like that are going to be made. Matt, your initial thoughts? It doesn't have to be around the draft, just the Maple Leafs in general here.
Yeah, I think, we know Brad Treliving's already said that they have a lot of work to do this offseason. We know they're going to be really busy, especially when it comes to addressing the blue line. And that could apply to free agency. It could apply to trades, but it also could apply to the draft. And this is such a rich first round in terms of blue line talent, even down at pick 23.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is the Leafs, they don't have many of those mid-round picks at all, right? So if you're in a position where you want to trade up to get your guy, they're not really well equipped to do that. So Brad Treliving is going to have to get pretty creative.
Creative is a word I would use, but also, like, is he going to hit a home run like he did last year, boys? If you recall, we were down in Nashville last year, and Easton Cowan, pretty damn good year, Steven, for Easton Cowan.
But I was one of many who were just confused by that pick, but just watching how he's physically grown and learned to just be a much better player. Like, man, like that season he had this year, easily the best player in the OHL.
Yeah, and it just shows you, too, like, prospects, I mean, some work out, some don't. But I think even in that short period of time, right? I mean, he has taken that next step where it's like he's knocking on the door of the NHL already, right?
Well, what's funny? I remember too, and it's not, a hindsight 2020 situation for the Leafs. I think it was foresight 2020 because I was there when they picked him. They had, I don't want to say arrogance, but they had the look of a group that knew they had found something. Because if you look, Easton Cowan in the second half last year was really good. He really hit his stride. So I think he was sort of a first rounder masquerading, or he was a first rounder, but he was a higher end first rounder, kind of masquerading as someone that was lower on draft boards.
Yeah.
And now he just looks like he has a ceiling that no one knew was possible, especially because Steven and I, we were talking about this last night. He didn't just grow as a player. He literally grew as a human being, physically.
Yeah, and mentally too, and everything. Like, this is a guy who was playing Junior B 2 years ago. But London has kind of figured out how to use the London Nationals as a good kind of playground for some of these guys who, instead of just throwing them in and just hoping things work out, like they're patient with their players, and that patience paid off.
Yeah, something tells me the Leafs have had a lot of success dealing with former London Knights. I mean, the list is crazy around the NHL. I obviously went to school in London. So obviously know quite a bit about the London Knights and what they bring to the table as well. So Easton Cowan, certainly the talk of the town here as we move forward, draft coverage. Did want to bring up as well, the Leafs family lost. He was an absolute stud, man. Sergei Berezin, it's kind of crazy. A couple months back, like, obviously, like, doing this Leaf show, I target, specific names that I try to get on this show, and had a quick back and forth with Sergei a couple months back. Couldn't figure it out, but I was trying to get him on the show, and passes away at the age of 52 yesterday, boys.
Yeah, it's sad. And, he was someone who, during a time when the Leafs were in a bit of a dark period, so after 94, 95, 96, they were down for a while. And right as the Pat Quinn era was beginning in the late 90s, they had sort of a team that no one saw coming. That team that had guys like Sergei Berezin, Igor Korolev, the team that Mike Smith put together at the time. Berezin, 37 goals in 98, 99. That team goes to the conference final. And he's sort of a throwback in the sense that he was drafted in 1994. That was an era where after the fall of the Iron Curtain, you could still find Russian players that didn't have a lot of scouting information around them. He was a 10th round pick. There is not a 10th round anymore. There's not even an 8th round today. But they mined him, and for a minute, he was one of the better goal scorers in the league. You have to remember, too, 37 goals in 99. What is that the equivalent of today? Like 50 goals?
Yeah, probably. I mean, he's sorely going to be lost. And anytime, I mean, you're never bracing for that type of news, but I know a lot of the hockey world and the Leafs world, I mean, it's just utter shock at 52 to pass away, Sergei Beresin. So our thoughts to his family. Just remember the number 94 like it was yesterday. Remember he wore 95 for Montreal, I think it was. Didn't he play for the Coyotes a bit too?
He bounced around late in his career. And for me, because he goes back to a time when I was kind of a young kid and I grew up in the Toronto area watching the Leafs. And I just remember his trademark cut and shoot. He could over the blue line. I think he would play a lot of the left wing, right, as a right-handed shot. He'd do the little cut to the middle, had that deadly wrist shot. And that's why I say captured the imagination. For me, he really did. Yeah. And that's why it's sort of a nostalgic feeling. You think back on what he brought for Toronto, and it's a very sad day. It's
been a nostalgic year in general. Like we even had Jacques Martin on a couple weeks ago, and just thinking back to the Pat Quinn era, and that's what I think about Sergei Beresin. You mentioned it, had so many big-time goals for the Maple Leafs in the playoffs, namely against the Ottawa Senators. So unfortunate to talk about that today. Tough transition, but of course, everything is moving quickly here in Vegas. You got the draft. And then we got free agency coming up on Monday. As you all know by now, the Daily Faceoff free agent special is coming up July 1st, live 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Tyler Yaremchuk, NHL insider Frank Saravelli, as well as former NHLers Carter Hutton and Colby Cohen and friends from all over the league for 3 hours of nonstop action as they dive deep into the madness of free agency. I'll be on a panel talking some Maple Leafs as well, so don't you dare miss that coming up on July 1st, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time at the Leafs Nation 401. Where you can subscribe here on YouTube. Hit that like button as well. If it gets to 100 likes, maybe we dump you in the pool. How about that?
I would love it. I'm sweating right now. I want it. Please.
That's the biggest story from yesterday for me here at Stadium Swim. I was like, took a dip in the pool, and the fine folks here at Stadium Swim have been outstanding. But the security guard who came over and said, hey, you can't swim. There's no lifeguard. It's a 3-foot pool, and I'm 6'3". I get it. It's protocol. But I was like, he's like, I didn't expect you guys to swim. I expect you guys to do a show. I'm like, it's 112 fucking degrees here. Like, that's the one thing I want to do is go in the pool, right?
I know. Well, I was saying to Steven last night, because we were there until close. We eventually were ejected from the pool.
Yeah. And they booted you guys.
We got the boot. But I'm wondering, is this the easiest lifeguard job in the world or the hardest? Because it's not a lot of action late at night. They're open till 11. But if someone does fall in, the type of state you're probably in, it's probably a serious rescue job because maybe they're not coming up. So I don't know. I don't know if that's an easy job or not for a lifeguard.
I don't know. Half the people were just making out there, and we're not really doing anything. It's been fun to watch, like the sports though. But
how amazing is this venue? So I had a chance for the first time last year to come check out Stadium Swim. Obviously, I do some stuff with VSiN downstairs here, the betting network, but I showed up and I couldn't believe how big this venue was. I know the Spit and Chicklets guys were here yesterday, but I was actually here for round 2 of the playoffs last year. I watched Vegas and Edmonton on the big screen behind us, and I would just say this venue is massive. They've done a great job, and it's the ultimate atmosphere, I think, for a sports fan, right?
I totally agree, and it's sort of uniquely Vegas. When you talk to someone who's never been before, and you say this place is singular, you have to sort of be there to experience it. This kind of explains it, and I find myself just wanting to be here for a Super Bowl. I feel like that would be a serious vibe. And Steven, do you have something
breaking? We got a breaking trade.
What's going on here?
We do. The LA Kings have acquired Kyle Burrows from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for Carl Grundstrom.
Okay.
Steven, get off the set.
It is a
Toronto Maple Leaf hey, it's a Leaf prospect. Former Leaf prospect.
You got me so horned up there to tell me Kyle fucking Burrows got traded. Are you kidding me?
You're not excited about that?
You guys do great. Why don't you guys promote what you do? Because you guys do some great work behind the scenes. Steven's on brand today wearing the Daily Faceoff shirt. Tee that up before we get into things here, boys.
I watched probably some of the stupidest hockey around. I watched, so I do all the prospect stuff. Obviously, a ton of draft coverage going on. Draft guide on our front page right now. Draft rankings top 120. And if you ever want to talk about hockey in Colombia and Mexico and Argentina, I'm your guy.
Well, it's funny. When we first brought Steven in, I remember making the case for him, and I was saying to the brass, you guys don't understand. Steven's hobby when he's not working, it's just more hockey. He covers fucking unicycle hockey with the puck. The puck's on fire.
Yeah.
That's what he does as a hobby when he's not working. He's just a savant, and I think he sells himself short. What he's done is unbelievable. And on Daily Faceoff right now, we have our draft preview hub, and there are more than 90 stories on that one page you can click to get all the coverage you need for the draft, which is now just a day away, baby.
Yeah, fantastic promo. Again, we're going to get into all things Leafs when it comes to the draft. We're going to talk about Brad Treliving, what he had to say yesterday. Producer Vic just texted me. The chat loves this T-shirt. I'm a big wrestling guy. This has been the best purchase of my life. Okay, it's Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon.
Ladder match, WrestleMania 10.
Exactly. We all know it. I've been on like a trend. Like a couple of years back, I was buying like jersey tees, NHL jersey tees, and then I looked in my closet. I'm like, holy shit, I have 15 of these things. So now my phase now is like vintage WWE T-shirts. So I got a Razor Ramon one, I got an Ultimate Warrior one, and I got this beauty. This is my favorite, boys.
I absolutely love it because I was pre-Attitude Era. When Attitude Era started to peak, it was when I was getting out of it, which is sad. I missed the best era of all. But this was my peak. Razor Ramon, my all-time favorite wrestler. Scott Hall.
There you go. Okay, at the Leafs Nation 401, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com and dailyfaceoff.com. The opening segment brought to you by Greta Bar YYZ. For a good time, find Greta, 590 King Street West. Weekly specials, live sports, over 60-plus arcade games. Let the games begin. Go big. Go to Greta Bar YYZ. So a lot of different avenues we can go. I want to start with it's the conversation that's not going to stop, and that's Mitch Marner. Matt, we could start with you. Your initial reaction to what Brad Treliving had to say yesterday in his media avail.
Yeah, right now, I think it's been pretty fascinating to see the cat and mouse game coming out of the two camps, where neither side is trying to commit too hard to what their intentions are. And I think it's smart business on both sides because you want to keep all of your options open. You don't want to give off the impression that there's no chance of a deal. But I think also the Marner camp is sort of leaning harder into the he wants to stay. And I think that jacks up the price in terms of needing a better offer to be getting him willing to come in, sign an extension on another team. Of course, we know he has to waive that NMC.
Yeah.
I'm one of the people in the camp that believes the Leafs do have leverage because this is not a Matthew Tkachuk situation where a trade is being demanded. They don't have to trade Mitch Marner. If they really want to ride it out, they can. And to me, it's going to take a really high-quality offer to get him. That's a good position to be in if you're the Leafs. You don't have to force it. The worst-case scenario is you still have a two-time first-team All-Star, Mitch Marner, who's 7th in scoring in the last 5 years in the NHL. There are worse problems to have than rolling into the season with him next year. That said, I do believe the Leafs are doing everything in their power to try and find a deal. I think you have to at this point.
Yes.
You have to change something. If you roll into next year with the core 4, core 5, whatever you want to call it, intact, I think it's a minor failure on the part of management.
I just want to see what he could do with Craig Berube.
So you're on the other side. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like at this point, I don't care what they do with him. But it's like I'm bored of the storyline, to be honest. It feels like we're talking about trading him every single
enjoying
year.
it.
Well,
so
it's good for content.
Content monster.
100%. You know, it's not like it's William Nylander. It's like this is a guy who's actually like, local to the area. Like it would mean a lot for him to stay there. But I think when it comes to this, it's like I thought they should have made a coaching change last year and then give them a bit more time and see what happens with. But now that they've actually made the change, I want to see him stick around. I want to see if that changes something. If Berube punishes him for him, not doing things in the playoffs, sit him if you have to. Give him that kind of that kick in the butt. But I don't know. I want to see him play games under the new coach.
The big word I would use is accountability, and I'm happy you brought that up because watching the Cup final, all I could think about was what if they had made a coaching change. Me and Rosie were calling for it in early January. I mean, let's not be crazy. This is why we had Craig Berube on this show in early January, trying to promote his work a bit. Nothing against Sheldon Keefe. It was time for a change. But again, that reinstilled. I know Edmonton lost, guys, but it was more like a what if. What if Craig Berube was brought in January? What kind of run this team could have potentially been on? And, I've been wrestling with that too because I think Mitch Marner, exceptional player. I just think it's time for like a hashtag culture change. And by the numbers, it's got to be that guy. Like, I mean, Nylander, you just signed him. It wouldn't be proper to move on from him, nor would I think he'd be open to it right now. JT's not going anywhere. He's got a year away. And then Austin Matthews, like he's untouchable. So process of elimination, and you want to make a change that's going to alter your roster, it comes down to Mitch Marner, Matt.
I think it's totally true, especially when you look at if you're the guy delivering the line, this isn't fucking junior, bro. You're probably on the right side of the culture, right?
Yeah.
And I think William Nylander has proven time and again, he does have that dog factor.
Yeah.
And, one thing that kind of pisses me off, there's such a cherry-picking war of statistics on Twitter.
Yeah.
Mitch Marner is good in the playoffs. Mitch Marner is bad in the playoffs. Well, depending on which games you slice out and show as a sample size. But to me, the sample that stands out the most is games 5, 6, 7. That's when Marner disappears. And if he stays, you have to find a way to bring back the guy who blocked those shots at the end of a game against Boston several years back. That was under a Mike Babcock team. I guess maybe there was more of a fire in that environment, even though there's so much toxicity there. Something was lit under Mitch Marner in that era. And under the Keefe era, I think he's more of a, I don't want to say players coach per se, but definitely more of an even keel personality with his players. Not necessarily with the officials, with his players. And whatever that mix was, it did not light the spark for Mitch Marner. And I agree. I think something has to change. With Berube, I almost feel like if John Tavares doesn't score that overtime winner against Tampa Bay, the coaching change would have been made before, right?
Yeah.
Then again, Berube would not have been available. He was still the coach of the Blues at the time. So maybe this is just the way it had to play out fate-wise.
Yeah, and it's weird, too, because it's like another civil war. Like this time last year, it was about Dubas. It was about Treliving. Now it's about should he stay, should he go. The fan base, there's a big chunk, understandably so, pro-Marner. Other side, not even like they're negative on Marner. I think a lot of people view it the way we sort of do, where it's like you want to make substantial change. Who's going to be that beacon of change, right? And I think when you look at Mitch Marner, it'd make a lot of sense. And again, not to read too much of what Brad Treliving said yesterday. I think you can't forget specifically in Toronto, just the politicians behind the scene. Like he didn't really say anything yesterday. He's not going to tip his hand one way or another. I think he handled it very well. The one thing I've noticed about Brad Treliving in a year now covering him, he's very calculated the way he conducts himself, very professional, great reputation. And I think he said enough that he proved his point. And I think no doubt about it, behind the scenes, we had Dave Pagnotta on the show yesterday. Our Frank Saravalli's been consistent that it could potentially go down. And I still feel that way. Like I think something will happen. I just got that feel over the next couple of weeks because I think they're just tired of the same old same. Like for me, guys, I don't think changing a coach is enough for this team. I think it's about the players on the ice.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Nick. And I think you nailed it when you said it's about the change. And I'm someone who's been pretty supportive of Marner because he does bring a lot as a two-way player.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's nothing to be a great regular season player. You want to secure a good seed. You want to win a lot of games. But you just have to change something. And I think that's what the crowd that's still passionately pro-Marner doesn't understand. It's been 8 years. You've had 8 tries. And what is the definition of insanity? It's running it back over and over. That said, I think that Treliving has been smart by not being too specific. Same with Brendan Shanahan. Everything is on the table. You don't name names because what if you can't find the right deal? Then you're setting yourself up as a regime that failed to make the big move in the offseason. You do it if it makes sense. You don't force it. You can always entertain a trade in season if you really have to as well. But for now, you see who comes forth with an offer. Maybe it's a winning one. Maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to get probably equal value when you're trading them no matter what.
No.
Because the player you get. So, but you got to be able to use that extra cap space wisely. You look at what Florida did this year and how much their depth was such a big part of their team. When Matthew Tkachuk wasn't scoring, other players were for defense too. If that really is what needs to be done, if you trade Marner, use that cap space, and you just build the best bottom six and you build the best third pairing defense, and that's what takes you over the hump, fine. It's worth it. You don't need to fill all that offense as long as you get the production from everywhere else.
Yeah, and it's funny because like this Marner thing, and understandably so. I mean, we cover the Leafs on a daily basis on this show. That's all we've been talking about for the last 52 days. If you can believe it, it's been 53 days since the end of Game 7 against the Boston Bruins. But
wait, I thought the Leafs were right there.
Yeah.
I thought John Tavares said we're right there. No,
man,
no?
I couldn't believe it, and I felt bad for the Oilers. It's like the worst thing in pro sports, like when you have nothing to say as an athlete, and the Oilers, they're going to use it as a learning lesson to lose a Game 7 of the Cup final.
Hey, David Kampf learned how to win this year at the World Championship.
Unbelievable stuff.
Pontus Holmberg, too.
But I do feel for players because, like, the media has got a mic in your face and say something. But when I heard that quote from the Oilers, I'm like, oh, shit, John Tavares all over again. And I hope they wrote it on a board down in Edmonton after that breakdown. But what I was saying is all the conversation's been about Marner, but we're all waiting for, like, the first domino. It's not necessarily going to be Marner one way or another. He stays, he goes. But how are they going to fill out that blue line? And as the days go on, again, they've been really, really connected here to Chris Tanev, and he's getting closer and closer to July 1 from reports. Sounds like Dallas is still trying to re-sign him. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's the thing happening behind the scenes too, is like they're working on free agency. They're working on trade conversation. We saw Dakota Joshua, as a former draft pick of the Maple Leafs, sign an extension to stay in Vancouver today. So there's so many moving parts. That's why I love these like centralized drafts. It's the last one, boys.
I know it's a shame.
Yeah.
You have everybody on the floor. You're starting to work out your moves. And I think it's tough because that schedule is so condensed. I almost feel for the GMs how much they have to get done, especially this year with the Stanley Cup ending so fast, or so late, I should say. And with the Leafs, the blue line, the good news is this is a good offseason, in my opinion, to go shopping on defense. You have some really quality options out there. Chris Tanev, I worry for the Leafs specifically, it's going to take an overpay to bring him in. He does have the exact skill set they need. He is a shutdown player who's also a relatively clean player, so he stays out of the box, but he smothers the opposition. He's a right shot. He just brings everything they need. And the good news is, though, if you don't want to overpay for Chris Tanev, there are a lot of options out there, right? Brandon Montour, Nikita Zadorov. There's guys like Jacob Trouba who could be on the block. I'm sure we'll get to him as well. But it's a really nice offseason to be looking for a defenseman.
I also wanted to see like what they have in Topi Niemela too. Like they've got a guy
prospects guy, baby.
Yeah, I know exactly. But like I got to watch him up close a lot with the Toronto Marlies this year, and it's a guy that would be hot and cold. But it's like at some point, what's he like 22, 23? Like what point is he going to take that next step? And he's a right-hand shot. He could do he could put up some points on the board. Not really physical, so that's not exactly like a Tanev player. That's not like a Brandon Montour, but he'll still be. I don't know, what is he to this franchise right now? Is he just trade bait at this point? That's what I'm thinking, but I'd like to see him get a chance.
Well, that's the thing, too, is like everybody wants the Leafs to make a trade, and if it's not going to be Marner, what do you have to give up? Like, I still wonder if the first rounder's in play. Probably not. I mean, considering what they did last June, considering who they could select 23rd overall, which we'll get to that conversation, but I won't lie, a polarizing name came across the wire today, at least. I think he submitted a 15-team list, Jacob Trouba, with the New York Rangers, the captain, 2 years left at $8 million. No guarantee Trouba is going to be dealt, but I think the Rangers are unique, like most teams, because they're a cap team. So they're shifting money in, money out. But right away, guys, I don't even know if Trouba would want to go to Toronto, but he's the type of guy I'd be looking at.
Yeah, Trouba's a really interesting one to me. So my understanding is I think the no trade list kicks in. Does it kick in July 1st?
Okay.
So there's a better window to move him before that.
Got you.
I don't have it in front of me, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case. So Trouba, to me, the concern is that he's someone whose game has declined a little bit. He's 30 years old, right? On the other hand, he's got, 2 years left on his contract, so you're not taking on too much term. That's attractive.
Yeah.
Question for me is, would the New York Rangers be willing to retain salary, or in their mind, is he still, he's the reigning leader or winner of the Mark Messier Leadership Award, so is his value still high enough that they wouldn't want to retain any money? If you could get a Jacob Trouba at retain money, for only 2 years, then I think you have to entertain that. He's a leader. He's a right shot. He's about as physical as a defenseman as we have in this game. He's probably the best open ice hitter since Scott Stevens.
I love his violence, and that would be something that I think the fans would love too. Like you see the reaction in the comments that you'll see online when he throws a big hit, which is almost every other game at this point. That's still a guy you want on your team. Even if his play declined, it's still a force of this team that would be such a big addition, and he's got that leadership capabilities. Another leader in the room can't hurt. You'd want to see him have a bit more success that he's had in the Rangers, but it's like at the same time, this guy does a lot of things the Leafs need.
I agree. Again, like they're going to be in on Tanev, we think, over the next couple of days leading up to July 1, but Jacob Trouba would be that type of guy. I totally agree as well. If you can get the salary retained, I would certainly at the very least entertain that conversation. If I do recall, though, I think he left Winnipeg, and it wasn't about leaving Winnipeg, but I don't think he wanted to play in Canada, something like that, right?
It was about his wife. So his wife, I believe, had a job opportunity in New York. So I think it's really similar to what we saw with Johnny Gaudreau in Columbus, and that's a factor you have to consider. So I just double-checked. It is the 15-team no trade that kicks in on Monday, on July 1st. So if you give Trouba that measure of control, it'll be tougher to make a move, especially factoring in the family situation for him. If you make the move before Monday, he has no ability to control his fate. So it's extremely relevant.
We'll see what happens. But again, that came across the wire, and I'm like, Jacob Trouba is the exact type of player this team needs. You can fill it in a variety of different ways. I think you make a great point, too, when it comes to free agency, luck of the draw, that there's actually some pretty damn good defensemen available. I don't know where you guys stand when it comes to free agency in general. I'm scared shitless that the Leafs are going to overpay somebody or a couple guys just to fill a need. But I tell you, if I ever have kids one day, right-handed shooting defenseman, I'll tell you that right now.
It's so true. And I do think the Leafs are at a juncture in their contention window where they are candidates to overpay. They actually kind of low-key have cap space right now. $18.8 million. I almost had to double take. Wait, the Leafs? Literally, in this economy, the Leafs literally have cap space.
That's my brand.
Yeah, I'm surprised. So they have something to play with here, and it's tough because I think what a lot of people don't understand is when you see these overpays, it's a result of just this is the competition of the market. This is what happened with David Clarkson. If you wanted to get him, you had to give him that term.
Yeah.
And the Leafs, they're in a state of desperation, I believe. So maybe they have to overpay. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Free agency is going to be a shit show.
Well put.
Yeah,
Well
that's
put.
pretty much all that needs to be said at this point.
Yeah. No, because I was gonna say too, like I always wonder about reactionary decisions and moves and what it means. Like Dylan DeMello, it's tough to quantify because he probably got a couple extra dollars to stay in Winnipeg. It's no slag on that market. Great team, great fan base, but it's no secret players don't generally want to go there. And so I wonder if Dylan DeMello is getting 4.9, what kind of impact does that do for the rest of the market? It's hard to quantify because it's different places, right?
Yeah, it's true. And I know with Winnipeg, I remember seeing it was a study done a couple years back, and it was anonymous, but it indicated that Winnipeg was on the most no-trade lists in the league. And again, like you said, it's no disrespect to the market, but it just, in terms of geography, it's sort of cut off from the rest of the league. So I think there's a situation there where the Jets have to overpay to keep guys. But at the same time, when you look at what DeMello's game is specifically, right-handed shot, more of a shutdown guy, not a lot of offense, you're getting close to $5 million.
Yeah.
If I'm Chris Tanev, I'm like, oh, my goodness, I'm about to get paid.
This talk that Tanev could get 5 years, because there's conversation around the Leafs, and you got to be careful what you hear, what you read, and what you subscribe to. But, I mean, there's talk the Leafs want to go term over AAV when it comes to Tanev to drive it down. But if you're giving Chris Tanev 5 years...
He's 34 years old.
Yeah.
It's going to be a Ryan Suter thing, right? Where they just, like, it's pretty much baked into the contract that he'll be bought out at the end.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
It just feels like it's coming. Like, I think the more you hear the noise, it seems like Chris Tanev is going to be the guy they zone in on. I wouldn't be shocked if Zadorov, if there's one thing we've learned about Treliving, he's got his guys. He has his guys.
So if Tanev gets 5 years, are you okay with just getting 2 good years out of him, given the way he plays and he's hurt every other game?
If it wins me a cup.
Yeah, it doesn't matter then, right?
Yeah, because it's the oldest approach in pro sports, kick the can down the road. It's 5 years from now is a problem, but...
Might be a different GM.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you never know. I think the pressure, it's like we joke about that, but there is a lot of pressure to succeed. Even, it's interesting, too, with, Craig Berube. There's pressure. If he doesn't win or do something substantial in, I guess, 2 seasons, I would say, I think he could be out the door. I think there's no more patience here, boys.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how Craig Berube navigates this market, because he's someone who is sort of economical with his words. I think a pretty no-nonsense guy. I remember him being asked about that the day he came in. Is he ready to handle this? It seems like he's fine, but I don't think you can really predict how it's going to be until you're in the pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And it'll be fascinating to see how he responds.
Another name I want to touch on, there is talk, I think the bio window opens today, right?
It does. Yes, Ryan Suter, the first casualty, second player ever to be bought out twice with Tony DeAngelo.
Dude, the guy's got paychecks from 16 fucking teams coming his way on July 1 or whatever. Yeah. It's wild behavior, but it happens a lot in pro sports. The name to monitor, I guess, in our parts, and I don't know if you guys like him or not, but Jeff Skinner. There's a lot of talk, Jeff Skinner. And right away, you guys know this market inside and out. You were at the games. Anytime a local product is available, we're going to talk about it. I'm having a hard time trying to make a fit for Jeff Skinner just because I think it's redundant. They have too many guys like Jeff Skinner. But again, if you can find value, which more times than not, when guys get bought out, they sign value deals. If you find value in a Jeff Skinner, you have to have at least conversation with him, right?
Yeah, I think it really depends on how everything else plays out for the Leafs. So yes, there is the local pull, but to me, if you're the Leafs, do you think what you need is an all-finesse player who's never played in the playoffs? To me, that's almost like a sick joke, all due respect to Jeff Skinner, who's had a really good career as a scorer, but he's the opposite of a winner. You could argue he's never been given a chance. That's fair. He's played on teams that just haven't had the right mix. But at the same time, I think redundancy is the right word.
Yeah.
I think he would be a rich man's Nick Robertson in terms of what he brings to the table. He's not a physical player. He's a fast skater. He can score. I think the only scenario in which Jeff Skinner would make sense is if you've traded a Mitch Marner and you need some speed up front. That's different. But right now, as the Leafs are currently constructed, I don't think Skinner makes sense at all, other than the fact he's a local boy, just like Chris Tanev.
He's nice to have. This year was an off year for him. He still had 24 goals, just under 50 points. And this is a guy that's, hot, cold. Like you look at the last couple of years. He had 14 points in 2021, 63 the year after, 82 2 years ago, and then this year 46.
Yeah.
This is a guy that's hot and cold, but when he's hot, he's really good. And
Yeah.
he was part of that, like that really exciting, rise for the Sabres that didn't ultimately turn into anything with him and Tage Thompson.
Yeah.
And watching what he's able to do. And, he's a veteran who actually did have a lot of success like in the playoffs before going to the NHL. Stuart Skinner has more points than Jeff Skinner in the playoffs. I think that's kind of sad. But I think realistically, like, yeah, he's redundant. If you trade Marner, sure. Right now, I don't get it.
Hey, we love our friends over at Bet365 on this podcast. What would you put the odds at Jeff Skinner playing a playoff game next year anywhere? I would put them very high. You think he's going to make a wise decision here if he gets bought out?
I totally agree. It's just a matter of finding the right fit. It's funny. I was thinking about that this morning, what team would be the right fit for him. I kind of like him for Pittsburgh, believe it or not, even though Pittsburgh's not a team that's guaranteed to make the playoffs, but they're sort of all in on denial with Crosby. They're going to keep pushing until he's no longer producing at a high level, and they could use a veteran forward who could score, capable of 30 goals. I actually kind of like that fit.
Does he take a cheap deal and go back to Carolina?
Well, you're getting 2 paychecks, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like you're kind of like Duchesne. Like you could just afford, like Wheeler, you could afford to take less and just go and say, like, I want to win. I'll take $1 million, go to Carolina. They got some cap space, especially if they get rid of Netjes and everything like that. Maybe that's a fit.
My dark horse would be the Florida Panthers.
Sure.
I think they got that hunger now. They won the cup this year, and I think they could come back even stronger next year. I think you always have to look at those tax-free states or whatever you want to call them, because they're always going to play an impact. And it's a curiosity as well moving forward about the buyout period. But Jeff Skinner entering the equation, certainly in these parts, it's been kind of fascinating to monitor Bertuzzi and Max Domi. I guess the latest is that it seems likely Bertuzzi's going to market. Max Domi, they're still working on. It was always likely it's going to be one, not both the guys. I like Tyler Bertuzzi a lot, but again, to get back to the old cliche conversation, you pay 4 guys that much money, there are going to be casualties, boys.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing with Bertuzzi, if you look at him from, let's say, the perspective of his agent, he already took the good faith 1-year deal last year. This is his time. He's got to make his money, his set for life money. So to me, I always viewed him as someone who is highly unlikely to remain a Leaf after that 1 year. I even thought that the day he signed the deal. It's just not going to fit economically. Max Domi, it's more a case of, is he willing to take a little bit less? Because I do think chemistry-wise was a good fit. He's a player who's really comfortable in the market as well. He embraces the spotlight. I think Domi got better as the season went along as well. And the center position on the open market is not that deep. There's great depth on defense, but not at center. And I think Domi does bring something to the Leafs that they could still use going forward.
Yeah, my gut would tell me I think Domi's going to re-sign. That's just my gut. I have got no skin in it. I don't know what's going on officially behind the scenes, but I think they're going to find a resolution here with Max Domi. Bertuzzi, I like the fit. I think he's a good player. I think he's the type of guy you need in the playoffs. It's just not going to work financially. So I think Max Domi's the likelier of the two here, boys, and I think it does happen. So
yeah, it's funny because Bertuzzi, I agree. He was a nice fit, and he really did get his game going. Remember how snake-bitten was?
Yeah,
he was
the second half, he was great, though.
I think he really found it. And I think given all the injuries the Leafs had to deal with in the playoffs, I think both of those guys showed how important they were. But I just don't think the money fits for both of them. There's no way, especially just considering how much they need to devote that cap space, not just to multiple defensemen, but also to a goalie, of course.
Let's get into it, Steven. Again, mention it. It's your Christmas right now. 23rd overall pick. I guess it's Christmas Eve. Tomorrow's round 1 of the NHL Draft. 23rd overall. Who are some names to monitor from the Leafs perspective if they make the pick?
So tomorrow I'll be doing a Leafs Nation mock draft for all the Leaf picks. But the one that I'm the most excited about as a good fit is EJ Emery. And I was telling you on the plane, get on the hype train there. This is a guy who's 6'3", right-handed defenseman, who is one of the most athletic, one of the fastest defensemen you're going to find. So a guy that moves as well as he does, has the size, has the nastiness. I talked to a couple scouts that kind of told me the same story when it comes to the U.S. national development team this year. He had Cole Hudson as his defense pairing. So Cole Hudson he's the brother of Lane Hudson, just broke the U.S. national team development scoring record for defenders. They were going towards him instead of EJ Emery because they were terrified of what Emery was capable of.
Yeah.
And I talked to some of his teammates that said, like, you better be 5 or 6 steps ahead of you, or else he's going to catch up to you because he's got that speed and he's very physical. If they don't get Emery, because he could go higher, I have him higher on my board than a lot of other people do. But if he gets off the board and they still want to stick with a defenseman, Charlie Elick. Both these guys are not very offensive. Like EJ Emery did not score a goal this year. He's a shutdown defenseman.
Very Cade Weber.
But better.
Yeah.
With skill. Then there's Charlie Ehrlich, who has a bit more offensive skill, but that's not his thing. It's about being, speedy, mobile guy. I just don't think he's as good of a defenseman. But, those are two that are like, I did a couple profiles for Leafs Nation, one of them being if Liam Greentree falls down, which could happen. That's a guy who could be hot or cold, but, playing at the Windsor Spitfires this year, one of the best goal scorers in the OHL, kind of fell asleep in the U18s, didn't do a whole lot there. But, would you like a guy who can hit like a truck out there and could score as a winger? And he's, defensively responsible. That's a guy you can maybe put as a second or third line winger, and it's good. So those are three of the guys I would be targeting, but it really depends on what Toronto's really looking to hear, because they need help at every position.
Yeah, and I was going to ask too, what do we know about the draft history of Brad Treliving? Because I think it's important to stress where the Kyle Dubas era, it was quite clear they love their skill guys, their skill forwards, their smaller type players, but I feel like that's going to change a bit, isn't it?
I don't have it in front of me, but I feel like Treliving has a hit miss.
He does.
Does he?
Right? He's not 100. There's been some question marks.
He's not Jim Nill.
But we do know that he does like his big guys, though, right? And the big defensemen. And there's a bunch of those options this year. They could also go for a smaller guy and get Aaron Kiviharu and bet on the upside of him being a potential 40, 50-point defenseman one year.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of different options there.
So my question is, boys, if you're the Leafs, let's say you get to pick 23, you don't have a second, third, and fourth rounder, right? EJ Emery's off the board, and so is Charlie Ehrlich. Do you consider trading down that pick?
No, I still say no. There's still enough guys. This team needs some help in their prospect pool regardless, because you need to have those guys who can come in cheap and you're not having to rely on signing a Tyler Bertuzzi in free agency. And Nikita Artemonov out of Russia would be a good one. Igor Chernyshev, like these two power forward players who are just so difficult to play against. There's so many good options that you don't have to pick a defenseman. You don't have to pick a big winger. You can take a center. I'd say they should just keep it no matter what.
Remember the dismay at the trade deadline at the Leafs? A lot of people were like, why didn't they trade their first round pick? Why didn't they go all in? But it's kind of cool that we're having this conversation now where they've hung on to that pick. And then I think, it's 1 year, and it was the first year under Brad Treliving, and obviously he got a lot of credit for the pick, but I'm sure a lot of due diligence was done before he came in on Easton Cowan, right? So I think there's pardon the pun, but a belief here that he's going to hit again, which is kind of cool.
I think it's really important too. I think I've said this to you on the show before, Nick, but it was advice that a GM gave me a couple of years back, and he said in the cap era, you need to hit on some entry-level cap hits if you want to win a Stanley Cup. And I think things are cyclical. So the Leafs, they traded a bunch of first-rounders away when they were going for Ryan O'Reilly, when they were going for Jake Muzzin. Dubas punted a bunch of them, and you have to shoot your shot, right? But after you've done that a few years in a row, you have to replenish a little bit. And especially when you're stars, you're getting more top-heavy. Those cap hits are exploding. With Matthews and Nylander making almost $25 million now combined, you need to graduate some ELC players to help you out.
And that's what Tampa did so well for so long, right? That was the thing where they just kept finding magic through the draft, these guys that are cheap. Toronto needs guys like that, and realistically, they don't. Nick Robertson doesn't look like it was a hit. You're going to the minors, Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan. I still think we're talking about Cowan being at that, not a best, but he could be a second line player. But I think he actually may thrive more as a third line guy who can kill penalties and bring that energy. He could do all that. That's the thing. That's why he was brought to Canada for the World Juniors. It's this dude could just fit a bunch of different roles, and that's what he's good at. Yeah, he put up a ton of points in the OHL.
Yeah,
but he's a lot more than that too. He's that's what makes him fun. Fraser Minton, I'm still looking at him maybe as a bottom six player. You do need guys like that will be cheap, but they need to be able to add some extra scoring there. If those two guys aren't hits, I'm not convinced anybody else in this prospect system is going to make a big difference. Versatility
is the name of the game, certainly with prospects. I love having you on just to lean on you. I'll be the first and frank and, coming forward and saying I'm not a big prospects guy. There's only so many hours and minutes in a day. So I know Macklin Celebrini. Steven, who else should we be looking at? What do you expect from round one at least?
So the second pick, the Chicago Blackhawks pick, is going to be by far the most interesting. Okay. It seems like they are probably going to go on a defenseman, and if so, I expect it to be Artem Levshunov out of Michigan State. This guy is just a beast, just so competitive. Ivan Demidov out of Russia is probably the most skilled player in this draft, just unbelievable hands, probably the biggest upside in the draft. Not a 200-foot player like Macklin Celebrini, but that's okay. And then that's when everything gets interesting. Is it going to be another defenseman? Is it going to be Anton Silayev? Is it going to be Zeev Buium? Story on Daily Faceoff today.
Nice.
Caden Lidstrom, a natural-born athlete, just this big dude who just crushes guys. Tija Ginla, of course. Iginla's an
He's the
interesting.
talk of the draft right now.
He is, and that's the thing. It's like people are asking, like, if Calgary takes him, is it a nepotism pick? Like, no, it's like legitimately
He's awesome. Yeah.
It's a good pick.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of good talent here. Like, this is not like a super deep draft. Like, it does fall off when you get to the teams, but I think the top end, depending what team you're looking for, there's a lot of good talent.
Yeah, and I love wheeling and dealing. Everybody knows this. They watch this show long enough. I love trades. I think there's going to be a lot of activity. Martin Necas, his name's out there, and certainly for the Maple Leafs front again. We're just waiting for the first domino to fall. Like, what's the first thing that's going to happen for this Leafs team? Actually bumped into Brad Treliving last night, said all's quiet. So everything's quiet.
Sure.
Everything's quiet except for the Buffalo Sabres and San Jose Sharks, who made a trade. And I think that is an interesting storyline with San Jose trading up to 11. And there's another story on Daily Faceoff we can plug again. Cole Eiserman, who I spoke to yesterday, his really good buddy is Macklin Celebrini.
Ooh.
And Steven has Eiserman number 10 in the draft rankings. And now San Jose's picking 11, picking 1 and 11. So do we see the good buddies united?
There's a potential right there. And looking forward to being at Sphere. It's not the Sphere, I guess. It's Sphere.
It's the Sphere.
We drove past this place, folks. If you haven't been to Vegas, I can't wait to see this thing. Like, I can't wait to be inside there.
We're going to see the player highlights and their faces. When I first heard that, it felt like, I don't know if you guys have seen the Hunger Games.
Yes.
But when they shoot the faces at the top.
Oh, yes.
I'm like, so are we killing these players here? But no. We'll see how they actually do that.
Yeah, we shouldn't do that. We are headed to Fontainebleau tonight as well. The new hotel, the awards, that should be a good time as well. I should tell you about Great Clips. Inbox question of the week, folks, with more than 4,400 hair salons throughout the United States and Canada. Great Clips is the world's largest hair salon brand. An official hair salon of the NHL. Salons are locally owned and operated and open 7 days a week. Your time is valuable. Use the Great Clips check-in app. See the wait time. Check it on your phone and get your haircut when you want. Today's question, what should the Maple Leafs do in between the pipes? We'll start with the goalie on the panel here. Every spring we have this conversation. They're not going to get a bona fide stud again.
No,
boys.
they're not, and I don't think I know what the guys you like, Matt, but I don't see that like Laurent Brissot being the answer to fix his team. It's just a replacement for Ilya Samsonov. I don't know, man. They've kind of missed the mark on getting a couple of those guys like Jacob Markstrom and stuff. I don't trust Joseph Woll to be the number one because of his injury history, but I almost say run it back with Samsonov. I know, kind of a scary opinion, but
no, come on, man.
Is he
don't manifest
is
that?
Is Brissot going to be that much better? A dude who's been a backup his whole career.
I don't want a Brossois guy. You know, I just call him Jonathan Bernier 2.0.
Sure,
well.
he's a good goalie, but
you're a Brossois guy. I can tell. Eh?
I know. Let me cook here. Let's go. No, but in seriousness, the two best goaltenders in the NHL on a per minute basis this year, Connor Hellebuyck was number 3, number 1 and 2. Anthony Stolarz, Laurent Brossois. No goalies in the league stopped the puck more or saved more goals above average in terms of the quality of chances against them. Those guys are the best. The sample sizes were small, of course, but I don't think it's the same as the Bernier situation where he was brought in to be a number 1. We know, based on all the talk of the probable extension that Joseph Woll is getting, that's at least 1A money. So the Leafs still believe he can be the starter, and whoever they're bringing in doesn't have to be a number 1. It can be a really good 1B. And we already know that Linus Ullmark is off the board. Jacob Markstrom's off the board. So I think all signs are starting to point to the Leafs going for Stolarz or going for Brossois. And goaltending is voodoo. I've said it before. Artur Silovs is a third-string goalie. He outplayed UC Saros in the playoffs. You're going to trade for UC Saros? You're going to give up an asset for UC Saros when it only costs money to bring in Brossois and Stolarz? I just don't get the idea of paying up extra assets to get one of the big name goals.
For more information, check out greatclips.com. Great Clips, it's going to be great. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of sports. Whatever the moment, it's never big enough. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Reading was never my thing. I'm like Anchorman, boys, but one bet quickly. We gotta jump here, but just one bet in terms of the draft that you like.
I think Demidov in the top 4.
Okay.
I don't think he's falling deeper than that.
Any projections, Matt?
I'm going to say that a team reaches on Tijik Inla. So let's say Tijik Inla in the top 5.
Love it. Boys, can't thank you enough for your time today. Absolutely killed it. Appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend, okay?
Pleasure, buddy.
I'm going to the pool soon. I'm
going
excited.
for a dip, folks. Thank you to RJ and Amo behind the scenes. Producer Vic back in Toronto. Tremendous job. Matt Larkin, Steven Ellis, of course. Go check out Daily Faceoff. I'm Nick Alberga. Be back tomorrow. Take care, everybody, from Stadium Swim. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Roseau. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.